All right, guys. I think we've still got people joining, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I just want to first say welcome and thank you for attending, well, our very first virtual preview for our very first virtual auction this year, as everybody has gone virtual in their lives. Pilchuck has also made that change. There will be a chance for questions and answers as we go through each of the items in the preview. We will give you a chance to raise your hand. So I will be monitoring that for, you can raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll be monitoring that so that you can ask questions about each of the pieces before we move on to the next one. So again, just want to say thank you. Let me make sure there's nobody else in the waiting room. There's not. Thank you everybody for joining us for this very first virtual preview for our very first virtual auction. We're really excited. We have 115 people from across the country registered for this preview. And just so everyone is aware, we are recording this so that we can share it with those who, if there was an accident or a snafu and they couldn't attend tonight, we are recording it so that they can watch this before they attend the virtual preview next Saturday on the 17th. So just want to make everybody aware of that. So with that, I wanted to introduce the people who will be, you'll hear our voices throughout the night. Of course, you know that we have 4 guest appearances. Well, actually, I think we have 3 guest appearances. We have one who has not yet made it. But we have 3 surprise appearances by artists whose work is featured in this year's auction. So we'll reveal them later when we get to their pieces. You can see that they are in the room with us. They have renamed themselves. And so I'll let you look around and see who they might be. But first I wanted to introduce who will be talking throughout the evening. So I'm Donna Davies. I'm the Deputy Director of Pilchuck Glass School. And this month marks my year anniversary at Pilchuck, and I'm so pleased to be here. So next, Chris Taylor, our Executive Director, who's with us. And
hello, everyone.
And Ben Wright, our Artistic Director. So with that, we also have a very, very special video and some remarks from 2 very important people to Pilchuck who regrettably couldn't attend this evening, but wanted to make sure that they said hello to all of you. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can hear this video. And they want to say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Boy, I'm so proud of Pilchuck. I can't believe of all these artists that have done so much. And when do we have 50 years coming up? I think it's going to be a great auction.
Well, we all know this is the most important fundraiser of the year. And we've all, as an organization, been challenged to make it a virtual one. But this is the most creative, forward-looking group of people that I know. And if anybody can do it, it's Pilchuck. So we're really looking forward to the auction, which is going to be coming up on October 17th. I want to ask you all to go and register at pilchuckauction.org. We're especially proud of the fact that almost 100 artists have contributed their work. They contributed their work every year to make this happen. Among them, we've got Lino Tallipietra, we've got Dan Friday, we've got our own James Mongrain. We've also got a great Chihuly package that's happening in the live, an experience that'll be very special around the 50th anniversary next summer, so please look forward to that. Just want to thank you all for supporting Pilchuck. Want to make this one of the best events ever. And now we'll pass it over to Donna Davies.
Have a great auction.
Okay. Now I'm going to share the presentation with you guys. Can you guys see my screen? Yes. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's go through the presentation here. So wanted to give you guys a few more details about the auction because it is a different auction than when we are together, and it is completely virtual. Thank you. Of course, there are 2 virtual previews, and just to be very clear, they are 2 different previews. So there's today's, which will cover the live and the spotlight sections. And then next week, the 13th, at the very same time, 5:30 Pacific, we will feature the Pilchuck trustees, the jewelry, and the Kaleidoscope sections. So please make sure that you register for both, or for the second one, because it will be a separate preview of those sections and additional guest appearances next week as well. So very important, wanted to go over some details for everybody, how to join our auction. Please go to pilchuckauction.org where you can click all of the links and register for the auction there. It is completely free. Obviously, we highly recommend going ahead and registering with your credit card, because if you do want to bid or make a donation, you need to be able to have that information already in the system so that when we go live on October 17th, you're ready to bid. You don't want to be in a situation where you're watching the show on October 17th and you have to start registering and then bid. Just go ahead and register and you're all ready to go. Once you get to our bidding platform, we thought it would be really helpful for you guys if we gave you a bit of a run through of what this looks like. Our bidding platform, if you haven't done virtual auctions this year, they're really quite simple, but you just need to have a bit of awareness in advance. And the most being that you do need 2 devices. You need, and I'll go through the next slide to show you what that means, but you need 2 internet capable devices, one to watch the actual event. So you do need 2 devices. You need one device to watch the event, which is live streamed on YouTube at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then you need another internet capable device to bid on items or to make a donation to Pilchuck. It is possible that you could have 2 browser windows open. However, there will be a slight delay from YouTube and the bidding platform. And the reason you do need 2 devices is because it's literally two platforms, right? The auction platform is one, and then the auction is live streamed on YouTube. So you do need the 2 devices in order to make that seamless for you. We will have technical support available for you by phone, email, or chat, and it will be available beginning on October 14th when things are open for bidding. And really, we're watching it all the time. So if you have questions, you can email, call, and we'll answer your questions. There are different ways also that you can bid. You can bid in the increments. As you can see here, you could hit bid now. You can also set a maximum bid so that you don't have to go in and manually enter a bid every time. You could select a maximum bid of $5,000 so that anytime somebody was going in and making incremental bids, as long as your $5,000 is in there, you'll be the winning bid. You will get a text from the platform noting that if you have been outbid or if you've won the piece. So there is that capability as well. And the third option is that you could just buy it now. So again, what does 2 devices mean? 2 internet capable devices. So you do need the one, as I mentioned, to watch the live broadcast via YouTube, and one to bid and donate. And the options are that you could do this on your mobile phone, a tablet, your computer, or a smart TV. Very important also, we thought it was good to cover, when do the auction items open and close? The silent items will open for bidding on October 12th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. The silent will close during the live event on October 17th at 5:10 p.m. So that means our live event begins at 5 o'clock. Our auctioneer will remind you during the pre-show, which starts at 4:15 Pacific, as well as during the live once we start. He will let you know there will be a countdown. You will get text reminders that the silent is closing at 5:10 p.m. So just be aware of that. The live and the spotlight items will be open for bidding on October 14th at 10 a.m. Pacific. And the spotlight will close also at 5:10 p.m. However, you guys see my screen, hopefully. The 16 live pieces will close in groups during the live event. That will be explained to you, and it's explained if you look in the online catalog, which Chris put the link in the chat. We are closing those in groups because we've got a limited amount of time, and so we're going to close them in 5-minute increments. So you can set a maximum bid on a piece, and just be aware that we are not closing them one at a time, but closing them in groups of 3 to 4. Okay. And all of this information will be put, the frequently asked questions will be put on our website so that you can see that. And again, we will have tech support for you at any time. Okay, so now we are going to take you through our items, and we're going to start with item number 1. Ben?
Okay. So off with a nice, quiet, subtle bang from this superstar duo, Nancy Cowan and Mel Douglas. This piece is called Entwine from 2020. So very recent work from this pair. You can see it's blown work, and if you look closely, the entire surface, as with much of Mel Douglas's work, it has been carved and engraved. To tell you a little bit more about these artists, Nancy Cowan attended Mass College of Art and Design and has lived here for a while in Seattle, where she's a vibrant part of the Pacific Northwest glass community and the larger international glass community. Mel Douglas's subtle, delicate work comes from the slow and considered process of the engraved mark making. She lives in Canberra, Australia, where she works as an independent studio artist and a professor in the glass department at the Australian National University. Nancy and Mel created this collaborative piece for this year's auction, which we feel incredibly grateful for. Their ever-evolving collaborative work explores the linear complexities and unique spatial qualities of glass. Working with the interplay of hot and cold glass techniques, their collaboration explores the relationship of form, pattern, balance, and design. As an interesting aside, Mel and I shared our first Pilchuck experience with a fellow first-timer, none other than the now world-renowned April Surgeon, when we all took our first Pilchuck workshop together with the legendary Czech engraver Jiří Harkoba in, I believe, 2003. As many of you know, Jiří is now dearly departed, but has influenced untold number of artists of my generation through Pilchuck and many other venues. Both Nancy and Mel have returned to Pilchucks many times as instructors, gaffers, and staff members, and we're really excited about this beautiful little piece.
Any questions about this piece before we move on? Okay. The second piece is Granite Kalimpong, and we're very excited because Granite is here to tell you all about his piece.
first surprise guest.
Granite.
Hello, everyone. Can you
Hi, Granite.
can you all hear me?
We can.
All right, perfect. It's nice to see you all, and thanks for having me. I'll tell you a little bit about this piece. This piece is called Wedged. It was for a group show at the San Francisco Art Institute on their new Fort Mason facility that's right down on the water. So this piece is basically designed to be a light capturing device, and it's really supposed to capture the available light in whatever environment that it's being displayed in, and sort of reflect back an abstracted version of whatever the current conditions are. So this was displayed in a hallway that was leading out to the water there in the San Francisco Bay. And, it really caught the beautiful sort of afternoon light that would hit off the water there. But you can see in the two images here just sort of how much it changes throughout the day. It's pretty subtle, but I really like this idea of making a piece that was responding to the environment that it was being shown in. So yeah, that's a little bit of a backstory of this piece. This is, it's hard to tell in the picture, but it's actually a wedge shape. So the left side is probably maybe 7 or 8 inches deep, and it goes to 4 inches deep on the right side. So the light sort of comes in at an angle and bounces around in this mirror light lined box, and then comes back through the screen on the front, which is made up of all borosilicate rods. Yeah, I think that's about it for the idea for that piece. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Brandon, I noticed that when you stand in front of it, you somehow disappear. Is that can you explain that optical effect, or is that just magic?
You sort of do, but there's actually about 1,000 sort of like refracted little versions of you in each one of the rods. Yeah, you're just the exact sort of optical phenomena that's happening there is sort of beyond my explanation, but it is pretty interesting to sort of stand in front of you and stand in front of this box and see about this sort of like very dispersed image of yourself spread out across the frame.
It reveals your infinity.
Nice, thank you. Jimmy, it's funny, a small personal story. Jimmy, I got to know his brother, Jeff, in Philadelphia. And when I walked up to Jimmy and said, hey, is your brother Jeff? And right as I asked it, I could see they were like twins. They look a lot alike. Jimmy, as I mentioned, is the head of Dale Studio here in Seattle, and has studied extensively Indonesian techniques. You can see the sort of contemporary and the historical in his work. And he also attended Appalachian Center for Crafts, where I think our own artistic director, Ben Wright, received his BFA. So I'm happy to answer questions on this piece, but I'm happy to move on to the next one as well. If there's any questions, why don't we use the chat as well? Okay, Ben, next.
Ben, you're muted.
This is a piece by Micah Evans, titled Like Grandma Used to Make. Also, perhaps the freshest piece of the entire auction, made in 2020, flamework borosilicate glass. And I have to admit, when I suggested that maybe Micah make this piece into the auction, I did so at least partially in jest. I knew the time and effort involved in constructing these beautiful functional pieces. But Micah didn't hesitate. He replied, I think I can do it. Pilchuck's very important place for me. I'm going to do it. And let's just say he used every available second to pull it off. He personally delivered this to us, flying in the middle of a pandemic with this fragile piece in his lap. to make it under the wire. I asked Micah why he was drawn to the sewing machine as a form, and told me that they're actually very personal pieces. They're exact replicas of machines his mother has used her entire life to quilt. And he traces his drive as a maker to a, quote, perpetual motion disorder that he shares with his mother that manifests itself into a need to make things and keep their hands busy. And that's certainly apparent in this piece. Micah actually hails from the small town of Kashmir in eastern Washington, and got his start flame working in a small private studio in Fremont right here in Seattle. He now lives in Austin, Texas, where he is both an independent artist and the director of product design at Grav, which is one of the world's largest producers of marijuana paraphernalia. His job takes him all over the world, researching production facilities and techniques in China and elsewhere, all of which he proudly steals knowledge from to inform his artistic practice. His obvious technical virtuosity and his wide body of knowledge and ability to straddle the pipe and art flameworking communities have made Mike a sought-after instructor, and he's taught at Pilchuck at least 5 times in the last decade. So really important part of our community, and a really, really beautiful piece.
I had a question here, and it asked about size. We've got this is a 10 by 15 by 8 as listed in the catalog. So it's darn near a life-size kind of piece for the sewing machine that it's representing.
I believe it's exactly, yeah, it's exactly to scale for the sewing machine.
Okay. Next item is Lino Tagliapietra. Certainly not a new name in our movement at all. Lino, of course, as I think we all know, began blowing glass at the age of 10 or 11, was considered a maestro at the age of 21, grew up on the island of Murano, and his association with Pilchuck is really special. He was first invited to Pilchuck in 1979 at the invitation of Benjamin Moore, Benjamin having met him when he was a young artist and designer in Murano and working in Venini, and came across Lino and invited him to come up to this hilltop in the Pacific Northwest and teach these Americans how to blow glass. And I used to represent Lino, and so I've heard these stories over the years, and Lino said, yeah, you know, I got on this plane, and it was his first trip to the United States, and he came with a suitcase full of tools, which of course looked like medieval torture instruments, and kind of freaked out the airlines, and also then arrived at Seattle at the SeaTac, and no one had bothered to tell him that it was an hour or more to Pilchuck from the airport. So of course Lino just got in a cab and arrived at Pilchuck and had no money, and said, somebody pay for it, and just got out of the cab and had his tools, and no one had thought that through, and so they were all scrambling to get the cash together in 1979 to pay the cab driver. So it's kind of a cute little story. The Piccadilly series is really special. Lino, of course, in his illustrious and very long career, has traveled the world, and he is completely inspired by his travels and cities and architecture and food, if you've had the pleasure of eating with Lino. But Piccadilly is inspired by Piccadilly Circus in London, and he was mesmerized by the patterns of traffic and movement and people and cars and buildings. You've got the tube stations, you've got restaurants, you've got bars, you've got monuments, you've got museums, theaters, and he just was completely mesmerized by the different patterns that were moving and the energy and the rhythms. And so he really captures that so beautifully in this elegant form, with these mesmerizing lines and colors and threads, which are then further accentuated by the cold working that go in the opposite direction of the threads. So a really, really special piece that Lino gave us from 2008. And the Piccadillys are really quite different now. He is still making this series, although they're much different. So this one is a really special piece in this year's auction. Any questions about this piece before we move on?
Okay, thank you. I noticed Ben pointed out that as you go through this auction, you'll kind of see a wide variety of years. Some things like this, which are made in current year from Catherine Gray, or some as we might call deep cuts from some of our favorite artists. So it's a nice thing to watch and see those years. 2008 is a pretty amazing to get a piece from that series that happened so many years ago. I'm honored to be able to talk about Catherine Gray. She is the second of 10 Lebinsky Brichtova Award winners that we have in our auction this year. Lino being the first one we just talked about there, who received his in 1998. It's an award that we give for excellence in the field and contributions to Pilchuck. So Catherine Gray is, as you can see, focused on sort of iridescence. This picture, and no photo could ever do it justice. Every time I saw someone standing in front of her piece in last year's auction, they were kind of moving around, trying to see, like head bobbing to the side, up and down, trying to really watch the light dance over these pieces. And I think that's when it lands in your collection, I think that's something you'll notice. It'll be a real highlight of your collection. Catherine is a former board member of Pilchuck. She is, as many of you may know, the resident evaluator on Netflix's show Blown Away, selected for her incredible respect and talent in the field. And she's also Canadian. I was out with lunch with her when I went up to Canada to film that show, and she said she was Canadian. I didn't believe her, and I said, "What's the last letter of the alphabet?" And she said, Z. So we knew she's Canadian. So anyway, this is incredible work. You can see, as I said, the photos barely do it justice because of the iridescence in every move, every angle, every look from this beautiful piece, which is pretty decent size. I've got it listed here as 13 inches around by about 5 inches deep. So really beautiful piece. And I'll pass it on to myself for the next piece. Okay, Toots Zinsky. This is a great piece. Toots, is this here? She was one of the earliest pioneers, along with Dale, coming out to Pilchuck in our early founding, first couple years. She was a student of Dale's at RISD. The photos are interesting because you really should go onto our max bidding page and see, because the one side and the other side look almost like night and day. They're different. She does this process called filet de verre, which is sort of glass threads that really lay on each other in sort of a fiberglass, sometimes very orderly and sometimes a little less orderly. This one has more of a scribble kind of feel to it. The colors move up and down the side. She is, as I mentioned, sort of a longtime friend of Pilchuck and really a longtime pioneer in the field of glass from the early 80s. She was a participant in building the experimental glass workshop, which is now many of us know in New York as Urban Glass, where Ben was working before he came to Pilchuck. She spent time in Murano, where she's perfected this technique. And I really highly recommend this. This, similar to Catherine's before, you kind of got to see a couple different views of these pieces because it's really just so beautiful and just changes as it moves around, which I know a lot of people like with their sculptures. So if there are questions.
There was a question about dimensions, and I can give dimensions on these pieces. I do also want to mention, please do go to register for the website and then go to view the images, because we have been able to put multiple images of each piece in the auction on our auction website. You can get overall views, detailed views, you can get magnifications of the details, and there's videos for nearly every piece. But this piece by Toots is 12 inches high by 18 inches wide by 13 inches wide.
I highly recommend, you got to go in there and hover over the image on our site, and you can really get in there for the detail, and it'll pay off for you if you're interested in the piece. Okay, Hiromi.
Okay. Well, this is, there are many silver linings to having a digital auction this year. And I would say that the ability to show and represent an installation like this by Hiromi Takazawa is a real possibility in a digital realm. This is a beautiful piece called Sleeping Forest from 2019. These are individual blown glass sticks that hang at various angles from a grid overhead. Sleeping Forest is inspired by nature in the sense of both calm and excitement that Hiromi experiences when she walks through the forest. Having grown up in Japan, Hiromi grew up spending quite a bit of time in the forest and always found a sense of curiosity in nature, especially the light captured in nature. Hiromi chose clear glass for Sleeping Forest to give an ethereal feeling as if there is a dreamlike sense of memory. Hiromi has attended Pilchuck numerous occasions where I can attest she is truly in her natural woodland habitat. I was blessed to have Hiromi as a teaching assistant when Mark Zerpel and I taught together, and she's since returned to teach her own classes. As you can see from this piece, she has a wonderful ability to distill and amplify the beauty of the natural world in a very simple yet profound way. It's truly a stunning piece, another one that really bears further viewing upon the auction website.
This piece sits, as Ben said, it is an installation, and each blown glass branch is suspended from monofilament, with monofilament from a grid armature from above. And there are 80 individual elements, and the installation as a whole measures 4.5 feet tall by 8 feet by 8 feet.
Okay. Our next lot is the only experience in the live auction, and it is a truly unique experience. It is an immersive glass weekend with Team Chihuly. We're thrilled to present this exclusive experience for 2 people during our 50th anniversary year. We're a closed campus, as many of you know, during the summer, but 2 people will be able to spend the night on campus next summer, fingers crossed, of course, COVID allowing, and receive a walking tour of campus, our beautiful architecture, studios, and settings, and then witness Dale and his team blow glass in our hot shop for the annual trip that Dale makes every summer up to Pilchuck with his team. As if that wasn't enough, also included is a private tour of the Chihuly Boathouse in Seattle, where the winner of this item will go to meet Dale and the team, receive a glassblowing lesson, and receive a bag of Chihuly keepsakes. This is an immersive Pilchuck experience, short of signing up for a class, which, by the way, I encourage you all to do. This is 2 days of Pilchuck magic. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It's never been offered in our auction before. And not only will you get to spend time with Dale and his team, you'll get to experience our campus life at Pilchuck, which, of course, Dale co-founded in 1971 with patrons and co-founders John and Ann Gould Halbert. So,
I want to point out the guy with the bandana on the upper left and the right photo. That's Jimmy Mongrain. That's the guy helping Dale make these pieces and lift them and swirl and help Dale out. And his piece was number 2 in our beginning early.
And a very good lead into Joey Kirkpatrick and Flora Mace, who many of you will recognize in the bottom left corner, who were working with Dale this last year. And I believe the next lot is their piece. Zanfirico Pear. This is from 1996, blown glass. So as Chris said, we have some really classic pieces. This is truly a Pilchuck love story. Joey and Flora met at Pilchuck in 1979 and have worked collaboratively for the past 40 years since that meeting. Their diverse body of work includes blown vessels with applied imagery, sculpture fabricated with wood and other mixed media, and these stunning large-scale blown glass fruit and vegetable forms, as we see here with Zanferico pear. Their work has consistently explored the themes of metaphoric content of the human relationship to nature. Cora and Joey have been constants throughout Pilchuck's history. They taught for 12 years at Pilchuck, built one of our treasured historic artist cabins, and together they received the Lebinsky-Brichtova Award in 2001. Joey helped guide the school by serving on our board of trustees for 16 years, and that's just a few of the ways that these pioneering artists have contributed to our community over many years. And this beautifully massive pear is classic Joey and Flora.
All right, and thinking of love story, here's another. Pilchuck's got a few of these in its history. I see Susan smiling. I'm sure we've heard our long share of the Pilchuck love stories, but Karen and Jason also met at Pilchuck and have been together for, many years. I think Karen's on, so I'll be careful. So this piece, they've been Karen was a core member of Billy Morris's team, who, as many of you know, during our off season, Billy, for many, many years, would come and rent and make work through the studio, and Karen participated and worked with him. The two of them, Karen and Jason, have become a sort of world traveling, world instructing glass duo. Jason was worked at Pilchuck for many years and recently returned to help us make sure that the campus is kept in tip-top shape. And they've taught all over the world. One of the best experiences I ever had was getting my first sculpting glass lesson from Karen and Jason. Very often birds, you see a lot of owls and a lot of birds, a lot of flowers, very natural world. They love, just Karen has got a sort of love for the natural world and a sort of real ability to capture texture and color and paint, almost as a painting in the glass. I had an opportunity to have a lesson from them, and we were all three of us were working in their hot shop just north of the Pilchuck campus. And I turned to Karen and I said, "I'm so glad I got my first lesson from Karen and Jason, or is it Jason and Karen?" And she looked at me and said, "Just say Karen." So I got my first lesson from Karen. So obviously beautiful. I was curious, I don't know, I haven't actually seen the piece in person. Are these glass legs that are just glass bars holding this all in one piece? So the delicacy of this piece is we got this solid base at the bottom with this glass and the water, which is, and the rods coming up forming the legs. So an unbelievably beautiful, delicate piece from Karen and Jason. They're two people who fell in love at Pilchuck and fell in love with Pilchuck, and we're lucky to have them in our auction.
Just so everyone is aware too, the dimensions of this piece are 28.5 inches high by 20.5 inches wide by 8 inches deep. Okay. Well, Raven Sky River is next, and I have a bit of sad news. Raven and I have been texting during this, and so sorry, I was a little distracted earlier because I was multitasking. Raven's internet is out, but he was one of our guest appearances tonight, so sadly he can't join us this evening, but he sends his regrets and he says hello to everybody, and I will try to do justice by talking about his work. I'm a big fan of Raven's. Raven is a native of the Pacific Northwest. He lives and works in the area. He was born and raised and started working in glass in 1988. He was completely captivated by glass the minute he started working with it, and has pursued the craft of glass ever since. And I think his sense of form and sculpture is just incredibly wonderful, as you can see by this piece that he made for us this year, a monk seal, who's very cute. Raven aims to capture the fluidity and the spark of motion and the spark of life that gives his sculptures the feeling of a dynamic moment in time. He lives, I believe, on Lopez, and creates his work in the greater Seattle area. So the dimensions of this piece also are 5 inches high by 27 inches long by 16 inches wide.
I was the one lucky enough to ask him if he would consider donating to our auction. And I don't think I finished the question before he said, yes, I would do anything for Pilchuck. It was pretty heartwarming. And so very glad to, I know he does regret he can't join us. I know for sure that's true.
Okay, JP Canlis. JP is another artist. We're very fortunate here in the Pacific Northwest to have a number of glass artists working in this area, of course, mostly due to Pilchuck, of course. But JP is not a native of the Pacific Northwest. He grew up in Hawaii, and actually first learned about making glass when he was in high school growing up in Hawaii. And really took to the medium and was encouraged by his teachers to pursue glass. So he enrolled at Alfred University in New York and studied glass, and inevitably started attending Pilchuck during his summer breaks. And during one of those summer breaks, as we all know, when you attend Pilchuck, you start making connections with other artists. And Martin Blank introduced JP to Dale, and Dale hired JP on the spot to work in the hot shop at Chihuly Studio while he was an undergrad. Then when he finished his undergraduate work at Alfred, he moved out to Seattle and joined Team Chihuly and was working at Chihuly Studio for 10 years. He has since established himself as an independent artist and is deeply inspired by nature, having grown up in Hawaii. And also as a competitive surfer is obviously also very deeply influenced by water. This piece is quite large and incredibly impactful. It's 7.5 feet tall by 3 feet by 1.5 feet. So a really lovely piece, as Susan said, for Hiromi's piece, for a museum or a hotel or a public art collection, corporate art collection.
Wow. This is not fair. I can't talk in front that are on the call. Can we, I just texted via chat, Aya, did you want to chat about your work? Because that's just not fair that I would talk about your work while you're here. Can you do 7 sentences for us? A surprise, surprise, surprise guest?
Sure, that's great. I'll be happy to. Hi, everybody. I am Aya Oki. My inspiration, when I progress, my inspiration is how it shows the plasticity and lifelike qualities. So it's always have inside of me when I work in the hot shop. And I came up with this work because I love making bubbles. And one day I was making bubbles in the hot shop with just a clear bubbles. And I was, oh, what if I make a lot of bubbles again and again? And I really loved it. And yeah, I'm very happy with this crisscross pattern. If you can see, all the patterns, crisscross patterns. It's called the Raticello. It provides in this piece, and it shows my passion from glass, that's plasticity and the lifelike qualities in this piece. And as I breathe out, exhaling, so I'm very happy with this work, and this is made at the Pilchuck when I was there last year. So this piece is very special.
Oh my
Thank
God,
you.
beautiful. Thank you. I'm sorry we sprung that on you. She just did that out of nowhere. I think I was going to say something, and I want to add too, because Aya spoke to our board on Saturday, and I know that they were all floored by the work and seeing some of the process, which I hadn't seen the process before, and just sort of like mind blowing. That most people talk about the light quality of glass, of light moving through the glass. I feel like Aya talks about glass almost like it's living, it's breathing, it's moving, it's bumping up against each other, it's doing, it's plastic. So I don't think I've ever met anyone who really talks about it in such a way that it's like alive, and that's interesting. So thank you, Aya.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And the dimensions of this piece are 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches.
Okay, our next lot is by Bertil Velian, named Janice, from 2008. It's sand cast glass with comes on a steel base. Bertil combines his creative and industrial training as the foremost artist working in sand casted glass, an innovative approach to a very classical material. His work has a symbolic and mystical narrative in which the human head, boats, maps, stars, crosses, bridges, pyramids, and rings play recurring roles and reappear throughout the layers of his work. Sometimes the light-absorbing glass is transparent like the membrane that allows vision into spaces within. At other times it's translucent to represent how our understanding can at times be clouded. Bertil first attended Pilchuck in 1980 and has returned over the years since then as an instructor and artist in residence. He brought with him and introduced the techniques of sand casting, which, as I mentioned, were borrowed from automotive and other industrial applications. These techniques became very popular, so much so that they spawned the creation of a separate casting studio at Pilchuck. As legend has it, the anal glassblowers kept complaining that there was sand all over everything. So eventually a new studio was born, which has now evolved again into our annex building. Bertil has been a huge influence across the world of glass. And this piece is a lovely classic example of his aesthetic and techniques.
What's also, I should point out, when you go to the auction website, you'll see that this piece is standing on a freestanding base, as most of the Janus heads are. And so it stands on its base at 69 inches tall by 12 feet, 12 inches by 12 inches.
We encountered a donor and a collector out in San Francisco who had a whole collection of these pieces, and they're right almost at eye level, of course, depending on your height. But man, it makes a statement looking this thing right in the eye, pretty much. It's 5'9" inches.
Okay, now for something a little different. This is from Dick Marcus and Katrina Hude. Putting things on top of other things. It is what it is. 2020, so brand new work from this pair. Assembled blown glass Marini technique with found object. Richard, or as the glass world knows him, Dick, lives and works on nearby Whidbey Island, as does his friend and collaborator, Katrina Hude. Both have contributed to Pilchuck throughout its evolution, and Dick's contributions to the evolution of studio glass have been profound. From his experience as one of the earliest American artists to venture to Murano to this work from this year, Dick's work always seems to find a way to put sort of mastery of traditional techniques, such as the Marini technique that you see throughout this piece, and put it to work in exciting and weird new directions that are definably Dick, even as his curious nature has led him to many collaborations over the years, such as this one with Katrina. I'm really excited that Dick has agreed to teach a sort of super class next year at Pilchuck with longtime friends Thurman Statham and Tutsinski. all of whom are represented in this auction. So I'll end the live section with that little program teaser for next year, unless anybody has questions about this work or any of the other ones in this section.
Okay. Well, that completes the live section. And next we wanted to feature the 23 pieces that we have in the spotlight section. The spotlight section, just to clarify too, our jurors for this year were asked to select a number of pieces that they felt needed to, because we knew we were most likely going into this virtual component, so a selection of pieces that they felt deserved a bit of special recognition. So that's what this spotlight section is. And kicking it off, I think Ben is going to tell us a little bit about Mr. Allen.
Yes, my friend Rick Allen. This is a Dysonian multi-port Sky Crier from 2016. It's blown in cut glass, silver, and oil paint. Just like the best of science fiction, I think Rick's work references his curiosity around science, but also conveys his innate humor and the lighthearted fun that rockets and imaginative fiction should embody. His simple forms create an evocative sculptural venue, a theater of the human condition, all wrapped up in the form of a rocket. As Rick says, how funny is that? Rick is a native of Providence, Rhode Island, was working as a studio assistant in Providence when he was magnetically drawn to Washington State and into the orbit of Billy Morris and his talented team, as we've already heard referenced with other artist bios. For the next 13 years, Rick worked with Billy and his team in Pilchuck during the off season, and what has been described by all the participants as a vibrant laboratory for technical innovation and spawned many careers. Over the years, Rick has filled almost every role on campus and been a consistent source of the most outrageous costumes in Pilchuck history.
This piece, let me give you the dimensions. Sorry, I'm falling asleep on the job. Here is, oh boy, I was not prepared. Is 15 inches tall by 6 inches wide by 10 inches deep.
Nice. That's very good. I was, Dr. Eric here reminded me, if you're interested in those costumes, follow the man, follow Rick Allen on Instagram. It'll be well worth your time to do that. And all of our artists, all of our artists available today. So Jimmy Anderegg, what an incredible guy here. Oops, sorry, I lost my script. He's also incredible. Okay. Jimmy first came to Pilchuck in 2007, and he's really grown to become such an integral and close and tight-knit family friend of Pilchuck. So close that he's actually been nominated as a candidate for the Board of Trustees, which hopefully by November he'll be voted on to the board. So we have an incoming board member. This is another one of those pieces I think you should make sure to go on to the video and watch and see the up-close detail of what's happening here. This has a sort of utilitarian, sort of functional shape and view of a traditional type of vase, but it's not, and you really do need to see the twists and turns of colors in the video to understand Jimmy's process of layering all these colors and then really cold working. There's an elusive amount of work going in this piece. Jimmy has studied and understands the tradition of Venetian hot and cold glassworking techniques and clearly brings a contemporary design sensibility to his final pieces. He's actually not far from Pilchuck in Arlington, Washington. He's purchased a piece of land with a few other co-conspirators and started a place called Gray Barn Studios, where they make work, they grind work, they make neon, they are farmed out for cold working, guns for hire in a lot of the community. And as I said, they become very close friends and very tight with Pilchuck. So I'm happy to present this work and really, again, encourage you to go get a closer look and get up on those details and see that video, because the colors like many pieces of glass, many of you know, you kind of have to see a few different angles and see it in motion. So this one will be rewarded if you do that.
And this piece is 11 inches high by 9.5 inches wide by 2 inches deep.
Thank you.
Okay, Martin Blank. I'm so pleased to present Martin's pieces that he donated this year. Red and Green Woman, which are acrylic paint, charcoal, and black ink, and they are framed. After receiving his BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design in 1984, Martin promptly moved to Seattle and began working on the Chihuly team, where he was an integral part of that team for 11 years. Martin still lives and works in the Seattle area, and his early work established him as a premier figurative sculptor in hot glass. His work then expanded to more fluid abstract landscapes, but his work in hot glass is all about carving space and creating tension between those sculptural forms. If you've seen Martin's work, it is quite spectacular and incredibly impactful in the way that he does have such command of the figurative form, as well as his floral forms and other pieces. I was fortunate enough to talk to Martin and went to the studio to pick up the pieces for this year's auction. And Martin asked me to convey how incredibly special these two pieces are to him. These, when we asked the artists about this year's auction, and I think this is true for all of the artists, they gave and they gave big. And Martin's feeling about these pieces was that Pilchuck is so special to him. He's been a grant recipient twice. He has been a visiting artist at Pilchuck many, many times. And as with, I think everyone, it has had a profound influence on his life and his career, as well as his personal life. He and his wife got married on our campus. And so it has a special place in his heart. And so he said, you know, when he knew he wanted to give us something for this year's auction, he pulled these two pieces from his personal archives. He was holding these for himself. They are from 2007, and they are drawings and sketches for pieces that he was to make in glass. So he wanted me to convey that they are very special, but he's happy to give them to us this year.
Thank you. Adam Burgess, this piece aptly titled Lazy Lines. You can tell he's got some lazy, swirling, whirling lines. I initially was writing my notes on this to say that it was bright colors, but as I looked, there were actually more deep colors going on there, and this piece is a ½ inch thick. So these are it's a really beautiful lazy line wall piece. You can see this sort of lovely brackets he's come up with for installing this on your walls. He has a degree from University of South Alabama. He's also a former military, a member of the military. He served in the U.S. Navy, and he recently received his MFA in Arts Leadership from Seattle University. We know Adam from his work with the Indigenous Youth Program at Pilchuck, and most recently he was the hot shop manager, or studio manager, I'm sorry, for Glassy Baby, who's based here in Seattle, and they were on campus this summer for about a month trying to catch up on some other inventory. So Adam is just one of the greatest souls you'll ever meet as well. So beautiful piece.
And I put in the chat, but there was a question about the dimensions of the blank pieces. So sorry about that. They are 30 by 22 inches each, unframed. We had them framed, so I apologize that we don't have the frame dimensions yet, but we will have those on the website. And also the Adam Burgess piece is 23 inches tall by 12 inches wide and ½ inch deep.
Okay, this print is by Charles Cohan, titled Samish number 11. 2017. It's oil-based woodcut print on paper. Although Charles is the longstanding chair of printmaking at the University of Hawaii in Manau, you can see in his stunning forestscape, so evocative of my current surroundings up here on campus, that like so many of our artists, Charles has deep Northwest roots. Having studied art at the University of Washington, where he enrolled in his first printmaking classes taught by Seattle printmakers Bill Ritchie and Glenn Alps. This was in the early 80s. In an interesting twist of fate, I recently received a phone call from a gentleman asking to donate one of Glenn Alps' original presses to the school. So the next time Charlie comes to Pilchuck, he may be teaching students on one of the presses he actually learned on as a young student. Just sort of a small universe twist of fate. Charlie went on to study at the California College of Arts and Crafts and Cranbrook Academy, where he got his MFA. Aside from teaching at the University of Hawaii, he is a co-founder of the Honolulu-based Lithopixel Refractory Collective, which is a print performance troupe. And Charles has been a constant presence and influence throughout the history and development of our own print program. And we really look forward to having him back in the near future so he can play with our new set of toys in the studio here.
And this piece is 70 inches tall by 40 inches wide.
Yeah, these are huge, huge prints.
Wow.
Yeah, very impactful. Okay. KK Krebs, I'm really pleased to talk about this piece. KK is a personal friend of mine. I used to represent KK when I was an art dealer. And we're fortunate to have her nearby. She lives and works on Whidbey Island. She first attended Pilchuck in 1984 and was so struck by the area that she made her home here and studied over the year and returned.
Uh-oh.
No, did we lose Donna? Oh.
To Pilchuck many times over the years and studied with some of the band Daly and Jenny Ruffner, among many others. I'll go ahead and give you the dimensions now. By 7 inches deep. She will never, I think I'm frozen. Am I back? I think I froze for a bit.
Now,
You're
yeah.
back now. Yep.
So the dimensions 24 inches by 21 inches by 7, in case you didn't catch that. So Voyage of the Baku is from 2016. And in talking to KK about this piece, she said that she will most likely never make another piece like this ever again. Again, another artist who gave so generously to our auction this year. Voyage of the Baku is very special. It was inspired by KK's time as one of the 2 artists invited to teach at the Toyama Institute of Glass in Japan. The other artist who was invited that year was Thurman Statham, who is one of our Pilchuck trustees. When KK was invited to teach at Toyama, she was already familiar with the Baku, but she was even more inspired after that time. The Baku, if you are not aware, are supernatural beings that are said to devour nightmares. According to Japanese legend, they were created by the spare pieces that were left over when the gods finished creating all of the other animals. And so they have a very long history in Japanese folklore and art. It takes KK approximately 2 months to make a piece like this. It's incredibly labor intensive, as is most of all of glass. All of the mosaics are made from window glass that have been painted with enamels, then fired and then cut. The sail is 2-sided, as you can see here from the images, and requires up to 5 firings for each image. She invented the way to build the boat of the body using what she calls a thin wall concrete, which is formed over a hump mold using mortar and fiberglass mesh. And the deck is painted wood and engineered to disassemble for shipping. We can go on to the next piece.
Okay. This is a piece by James Devereaux entitled Clovis from 2018, solid sculpted glass on an aluminum and titanium base. The name of this piece, Clovis, refers to the widespread archaeological findings of a certain type of arrowhead known as Clovis points. The making of those arrowheads involved napping or striking one rock against another to skillfully chip away segments to arrive at a sharp point. If you look closely at this image, you can see that along the, I believe it would be the left edge for everybody seeing this, James has replicated this process in glass by striking the glass at the perfect temperature where it chips off beautifully but does not shatter. And I've had the chance to watch James do this. It's really something to see him and his team sculpt these beautiful forms and then pull out a hammer and start striking, swinging away at the form. But if you hit it just right, you get this beautiful surface that really can be achieved at in no other way. James Devereaux, he's been working in glass from really a very early age of 15. And I think this deep familiarity with the material has led to an innovative approach to hot glass with stunning results, as you can see in this piece. He was served as a longtime glass technician at the Royal College of Art before leaving London in 2013 to set up a new studio in collaboration with glass artist Catherine Husky. I met James last summer when he was helping Dante Marioni teach a class with the paper cut artist Andrea Dezo that covered imagery technique that honestly none of them were expert at, but I was really impressed by their whole team's process of discovery and sort of rapid innovation. James also will be teaching next summer and will be teaching with his longtime collaborator, Lewis Thompson. So really stunning piece, also quite large. Donna can give you the exact dimensions of it.
Yes, this piece is 32.5 inches tall by 6 inches by 6 inches. Okay.
Okay. This artist, Marita Dingus, this title is Under Pressure from this year. So perhaps relates to some of the gestalt of 2020. Assembled found objects, metal, plastic, glass beads, paint, and fabric. This artist was a delightful discovery for me during our jury process, being new to the West Coast myself. But she was well known and beloved by my two Seattleite co-jurors. Marita Dingus attended Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia and San Jose State University before coming here to the West Coast. She's received a Visual Artist Fellowship from Artist Trust and a Guggenheim Fellowship, as well as many other awards throughout her career. In her own words, I consider myself an African-American feminist and environmentalist, an environmental artist. My approach to producing art is environmentally and politically infused. Neither waste humanity nor the gifts of nature. I am primarily a mixed media sculptor who uses discarded materials. My art draws upon relics from the African diaspora. The discarded materials represent how people of African descent were used during the institution of slavery and colonialism, then discarded, but who found ways to repurpose themselves and thrive in a hostile world. So you can see this playful piece contains a powerful social justice message embedded in an ecologically conscious art practice and is a great representation of the times we find ourselves in.
Marita also has an exhibition coming up at Traver Gallery in November through January this coming year.
The dimensions of this piece are 15 inches tall by 11 inches wide by 10 inches deep.
This piece is by Montserrat Duran Muntadas, Ovoid number 77. Also from this year, blown glass, flamework glass, and fabric. Montserrat is an artist whose development I've been watching for a while now through various opportunities and juries that I've sat on. Her career path is sort of truly illustrates the international nature of today's glass world. She started studying glass in Segovia, in Barcelona, in Spain, then emigrated to Montreal, where she worked at the famous Espace Vert studio in Montreal, before being invited for a residency at Northlands in Scotland, where she actually began the experiments in combining glass and textiles that led to the work that you see before you that was made this year. So a lot of different influences coming together. These forms were showed together in an exhibition titled My Beautiful Children and Other Anomalies. I think you can see the pleasing palette of pattern and texture combined with these sort of vaguely anatomical forms gives each sculpture sort of a delightful personality of its own. Montserrat was selected to be an emerging artist in residence this year, and in an ideal world would be arriving on campus in a few weeks here. But due to the circumstances, has agreed to put off her eagerly anticipated residency until next fall. And we're certainly very excited to have her on campus here as well.
And this piece is 9 inches tall by 6 inches wide by 5 inches deep. Okay, Dan Friday, one of my favorite people, such a lovely person, and excited to, as you all probably have seen from our social media posts, our juror's choice for this year's auction. If you have not seen it, do look at our Instagram and Facebook pages, where we posted a really fantastic video that we made for this year's auction about Dan and his work. And it really talks about finding his way in glass, really finding glass, finding his voice in glass, and also the impact that Pilchuck has had on his career. And of course, Dan helped create the Indigenous Youth Project on campus. So very excited about Dan being juror's choice this year. This is Kolshan Bear, which he made this year for us. Dan is a member of the Lummi Nation and is based in Seattle. He has spent the last 20 years working for artists such as Dale, Paul Marioni, and Preston Singletary, among others. He obviously has taught at Pilchuck many times and has had residencies at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, at the Dream Community in Taipei, Taiwan, and is the recipient of the Discovery Fellowship through the Southwestern Association for Indian Arts. Dan is also very obviously deeply influenced by Northwest Coast imagery and nature and the land. So very excited about this piece. The dimensions I should give you are 8 inches tall by 14 inches wide by 3 inches deep.
Etsuko, this is, oh, wow. I'm really excited to be able to speak about her work, Etsuko Ichikawa. She's Tokyo-born but Seattle-based. Graduated from the Tokyo Zoki University in Japan in 1987, but you know, the video that was made about Pilchuck's history was called A Dance with Fire. And if you've ever seen a video, and I highly encourage you to look up Etsuko's work online and see the videos of her making these pieces, pulling a glob of hot glass out of the furnace and dropping it onto this paper and pulling it through, and sometimes catching fire, sometimes just sort of steaming up. You can kind of see that many people have tried this before, pyrographs, if you as they're called. But no one has pulled it off, the poetry that you see in her pieces. She's a multimedia artist. She's received awards from the Americans for the Arts, the Paula Krasner Award, the National Endowment for the Arts. So she's, I'm proud to have one of these pieces in my collection. I know this is one I've got my eye on as well. So if you're going to bid, I'm going to be bidding with you. It's a beautiful, delicate piece. And as I said, it's just sort of poetry. We were talking about it the other day and said it seemed like maybe a flower stamen, but I'm sure like watching clouds or watching these things, you can kind of see many things in Etsuko's work.
And this piece is framed and it is 30 by 22 inches.
An interesting shift from that delicate, beautiful, gentle movement to something that's sort of so solid and so rock hard here with Steve Jensen's piece. You can see his influence over his family, who are a long tradition of Norwegian fishermen, and Steve, who I secretly found out his name is Sven Jensen. So I can't call him Steve anymore. He's a Sven Jensen. He's certainly got you can see the nautical themes. You can see the sort of heaviness in this cast recycled glass piece, boat resin, salvaged bronze boat parts. He was actually the first piece that was donated to the auction this year in 2020. Steve has always supported and been very supportive and generous toward Pilchuck. So I think you can see his work. He's got many monumental sort of public art pieces around Seattle, and he works in many mediums. And he's sort of a guy who's known about and around town here in Seattle. He and his partner Vincent are seen at everything when we used to be able to be seen at places and fundraisers. So Steve is just a strong friend of ours, and it's a nice solid piece. I think dimensions are, it's quite large, 29. It's 13 inches by 29 by 11. So it's got a great presence and a really beautiful nautical theme. On to Ben, I believe.
Okay, this piece is from Marjana Krasminska-Balush, called The Stilge, 2018. It is slumped glass and steel. It's a wall-mounted piece. Marjana was recently named the dean of the glass department at Eugeni's Gephardt Academy in Breslov, Poland. It is the main glass program in the country of Poland, and Marjana, often represented by Bullseye Glass, has been very well represented internationally, both artistically and then also as an ambassador, both for her school and for Polish glass in general. In those sort of duties, she's been to Pilchuck a number of times as a student and as an artist, as an emerging artist in residence. And now next year, she will be teaching with us as well. For those of you who have followed Marjana's work, you may know that the vast majority of it is monotone and white. So it's quite unusual to actually have a piece executed in black glass here that she's donated for this auction. Really beautiful, minimalist piece.
The first time I on this piece, it looked like a sort of folded gray latex. I mean, it really kind of messes with your mind. It's beautiful the way she's handled the glass.
The dimensions of this piece are 37 3/4 inches tall by 15 inches wide by 2.5 inches deep.
Excellent. I'm so glad to be able to speak on to Morgan Madison's work. Morgan was on our 2018 auction tour, and he opened a studio and was able to show us his technique of powder printed glass. And when you can go again to our website and look closer and zoom in on some of this work, you can see the powdering. It's almost as if he's silk screening the sand through a silk screen onto the glass and then fusing. It's a really beautiful piece. He's a Seattle-based artist. Kiln forming is his primary medium. He says he has an inspiration by the teachings of Bob Ross. Is this the happy painting guy, Bob Ross? I love that. I think Bob Ross inspired a lot of artists. He's certainly, his work has taken him around the world to the to the Ireland Glass Biennial, the Museum of Art and Design in New York, It's Northlands Creative in Scotland, and certainly Pilchuck Glass School. The piece during the auction last year, 2 years ago, we were watching him construct sort of an outdoor installation that ended up in the Glass-tastic show at the Bellevue Art Museum in 2019. It was out on their roof. So beautiful installation pieces. He goes very big scale. This one, not quite as big scale, but big enough in its own right, 24 by 18 by 1 inch. So there's a nice thick frame around it. So it's a beautiful piece by Morgan, and 2017 is the year on it.
Okay, this is a piece from Eliza Milev. It's titled Glass Sculpture in Jewelry, and it is very clearly both of those things. This is also a quite recent piece made this year, 2020. Cold work glass and very finely finished steel. Eliza, for me, was another great surprise from the jury process. I kind of immediately recognized his name from emails we had exchanged advocating for his glass arts students from Bulgaria. And he's sort of a constant diplomat for that glass scene. But I was blown away by this beautiful piece of jewelry that he submitted, and I'm now really intrigued to see more of his practice and learn more about this artist. He received his PhD in porcelain and glass design, so he is Dr. Milev from the National Academy of Arts in Bulgaria in 2017, where he now teaches. He also has held residencies at Northlands and Barango Studio in Murano and City Internationale des Arts in Paris. So a stunning piece of artwork that, as the title suggests, you can bring with you wherever you go.
And the dimensions of this piece are 11 inches by 6.5 by 1.5 inches. So I'm incredibly excited to announce that Anna Miloslavsky is another one of our surprise appearances. So I will turn it over to Anna.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Anna Miloslavsky. I'm born in East Germany, and I got my BA in glass from the Royal Danish Academy in Denmark, and then my MFA in sculpture from the University of Washington. I've received an Artist Trust Fellowship in 2017 and was one of the Emerging Voices in Craft award recipient. And my work has been included in a number of museum collections, like the Corning Museum of Glass, the Toyama City Museum, and Castello Sforzesco in Milan. My work has been shown at a number of museums as well, the Museum of Art and Design, the European Museum of Contemporary Glass, the Northwest Museum of Art, and I currently have a solo show at the Bellevue Arts Museum, which just recently reopened on October 3rd. So now it's possible to see that in person. I still have a piece up at the Tacoma Museum of Glass that was an exhibition that got extended by the pandemic. And the piece that I donated to the Pilchuck auction is an older piece from 2013. It's a piece that I made during my residency at the Corning Museum of Glass. And in a way, it is an ongoing project. There is a part of me that's an incredible material nerd, really interested in how glass behaves and what it can do. And back in 2014, I was introduced kind of for the first time a little bit to bullseye glass and started working with powders. And back then I was really interested in collecting material out of the cold shop table saw, the water fed saw, where you always cut the glass with water, and then you have a tray where all of these sediments from cutting will settle into these layers. And when I had to clean out the saw, I really liked how you would wash with water through all of these different layers of glass that had been accumulating in the cutting process. And so I started looking at glass powder, very similar to the way I look at kind of soil-like sediments. and was trying to figure out how I can use this material in a way that where it behaves like soil. So I was working a lot with compressing powders and moving powders and then firing them in the kiln, which again, with the shrinkage of powder, will end up opening up all of these compressions and kind of pulls that I was doing. And so this piece is kind of a diptych of two pieces that are in aluminum frames, and it's layered bullseye powder that I layer on a sheet of thin fire. And by lifting up the sheet after I layered up all these different layers, the powder gets compressed, and when I release it, those compressed layers pulls apart, and then in the firing process it even gets distorted further so that all of these different layers are exposed. So even though it looks kind of on the top layers, in between and underneath those layers. And right now the at Vetri Gallery, which is part of Traver, they're in the process of hanging a newer series of these pieces. So if you end up really liking it and not getting a chance to get that piece in the auction, there are more of these out in the world. And I'm quite happy with this work and being able to donate it to Pilchuck. My first experience with Pilchuck was 2008, when I came in as a student, as a scholarship recipient. And since then, I've been teaching at Pilchuck, TAing at Pilchuck, and I was an artist assistant as well. So I've basically done the whole Pilchuck deal in any kind of way or form. And I'm really excited coming back to teach at Pilchuck at some point in the future. And I must say, for me, Pilchuck had a huge influence on my life, because in 2008, when I came here for the first time, I also met my partner there. So now I'm married and moved from Europe to Seattle, and I live here in the Pacific Northwest because of Pilchuck. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Anna.
That's beautiful.
Any questions for Anna while we have her?
And are those negative spaces where it's sort of ripped? Is that you can see back in through there?
Yeah, exactly. So you can see right through the piece onto the back round of these. And they're, I don't remember dimensions, but they're relatively large. They're like 8-20 inches, I think.
Yes, they are.
Like
each panel, each panel is 17 3/4. Well, they're not. Yeah, 17 3/4 by 8 1/4 by 3/4 inches.
Nice.
Oh, my husband. Yes. So my husband is Matt Sauce. And he also has a piece in the auction. We share a studio together. So yes, I'm very excited.
Yay, thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Well, the theme continues with another love story, I guess, huh? Right? Jenny and Sabrina first met at Pilchuck in 1989 while staff members. This work is, I first encountered this series, 2019. This was when they had an exhibition out in the Bainbridge. It sort of sprung up out of the show that they had at the Bainbridge Island Art Museum. They spent many years on staff at Pilchuck, working through, traveling. They've been inspired by the women of the world, if you will. They've taken many, many trips internationally together. The show at Bainbridge Island was celebrating 25 years of their collaborations. This piece, it's amazing. They do, you can't kind of make it out from this photo, and you can kind of see in some of our details, but inside those glass eyeballs, the sort of irises, there's a silk screened image of birds flying. And in talking with Jenny and Sabrina about this technique, it took them a while to perfect this. It's one thing as sort of Morgan Madison, which we saw, to create a powder coat on a flat image. It's excuse me, another thing, something that's going to then be blown or moved or molded. So they've got this incredible technique that they've pioneered. They are hands-on as hands-on could be. Not only did they do their work over at the at Pratt, but then they come back to their home and studio in West Seattle and fabricate all this metal, all the armatures, all the other parts and pieces. So they're pretty amazing and inventful women. It's dimensions on this, I'm sorry, are 13 inches by 35.5 by 4. So they're installed as beautiful eyeballs that you would come upon, and of course put it at whatever height you desire in your collection. That's Jenny and Sabrina. They're not Lubinsky Brichtova Award winners. We might have to look into who's in charge with that program. So, all right, thank you.
So this is a good friend of mine, Richard Royal. Elusive from 2020, Rich made a piece from this series. He's not actually working in this series currently. His work is very different, but he made this piece for us this year for this year's auction from his Aperture series, if you're familiar with that. For many years, Rich's work was inspired by his family, his growing family, his children. And this Aperture series really speaks to when his son was born, and the fact that there was this connectedness of parent to child, and the fact that they are a mirror of you. So there are a lot of optical things happening in this piece. The mirroring that happens as you look through the piece, the connectedness of the human connection, parent to child, and vice versa. And the fact that it's, you're seeing a reflection of yourself in your child. So it's a really special piece. It meant a lot that Rich made such a piece from such a sentimental series for this year's auction. Rich is a native of the Pacific Northwest and is recognized internationally as one of the most skilled and talented glassblowers in the studio glass movement. He actually began working at Pilchuck in 1978, one of the earliest at Pilchuck, and actually first started out as a ceramist, but was so taken by glass in the early days in the 70s when glass was really exploding here in Seattle. He worked his way up through the ranks and actually became one of Dale's main gaffers, and that was a relationship that lasted for a significant number of years, and Rich was a key member of Dale's team. Rich then went on to emerge as a solo artist in the 80s and was one of the first artists in residence at the Waterford Crystal Factory in Ireland, and he continues to teach as a guest artist and faculty at various universities, but most importantly, especially at Pilchuck. The dimensions of this piece, I will tell you, are 22 inches tall by 11 inches wide by 4.5 inches deep. So next, I'm also very excited to introduce Ed Schmid, who is our final guest appearance for this virtual preview. So he's been on here as Dr. Glass, and I will turn it over to Dr. Glass.
Hello, and greetings from Bellingham, Washington. I hope you can see me up in the corner of your screen somewhere there. Look, I made my own cue cards. No, I didn't really need those things. Anyways, I'm pretty new to Zoom, but I've been very long time Pilchuck affiliate or alumni, if you will. I started 33 years ago as a student in 1987 and fell in love with the place, as many of my other fellow artists have, as well as a lot of supporters to the school. I think what really drew me into the school, besides its spectacular beauty, was the community that existed there. I was pretty much welcomed into the entire community. For me, coming from the Midwest, growing up in Chicago, learning how to hug people on a daily basis was a rather new thing. But more importantly, how that place really instilled community and working together. And of all the institutions that I've been a member of and or participated in over the years, I would have to say Pilchuck is unquestionably the one that's influenced me the greatest in all these years. And so I've worked on staff in many different capacities. After my first year as a student, I worked up in the cold shop for 2 years, the entire summers, back when we used to be able to work that entire time. And what that did was introduce me to a lot of the international artists that have come through there, influenced me in ways that could take hours to explain. However, some of that carried through into me becoming not only an artist, but also an educator. And that's been one of the things that have stuck with me ever since I first picked up a blowpipe in '84. My professor, Bill Carlson, at the time said, if you have something valuable, please pass it on and share that with people. And that really has held through and been a philosophy of mine ever since the very beginning of that first gather. I'm the guy that, wrote the books on glassblowing. So there's beginning glassblowing, advanced glassworking techniques, and then a really fun book, The Glassworker's Bathroom Reader. I spend usually half my year teaching classes and workshops all over the world, but with COVID, things have changed rather dramatically. So I'm not actually doing any of that right now. However, I am working on another huge book here. This is Venetian Glassblowing Techniques. It's in its rough draft form. It's about 400 pages currently, and I expect it to get a little bit bigger. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, but it is a pretty monumental task. As to the piece that I donated, this one comes from my own personal collection, and to part with it, but in this time of COVID and also this extraordinary time, I mean, I think we can all be in agreement that 2020 has been one hell of a decade so far. Just my own personal experience, but also everything that everybody seems to be going through. And so I really wanted to try to help support the school in as best way as I could. So I decided to donate this piece. And the inspiration actually came from a TV show I used to watch with my daughter. It was called Signing Times. And it shows kids how to use sign language as a way to communicate. And for some people, it's the very first method that we talk to each other and gesture. And as an artist, I constantly worked my hands and thought about making a piece for a public art piece for our local hospital. This is actually the third version of the piece that I've put together, and it's unquestionably my favorite of the versions that I've done. And it's done in all hot sculpted glass. Each piece is made individually. There's no molds or anything used in the process of making any of these things. I had to learn the actual sign language alphabet and then try to render them in hot glass. So I made all 26 of these hands. I photographed them. I sent them off to universities, colleges, and other places, schools for the deaf. And I got a few people to comment on the shapes and the size and the positions of everything, and discovered that I'd have to remake a number of them. So out of the 26 hands, I ended up making 13 new ones, just so the gestures were correct. And some of them are pretty hard to do, but I also covered them in iridescent gold color and reduced them to give them a shiny golden color. And it added a little complexity to the visual presentation of the piece. It really is one of my favorite ones, and it does speak to a number of different things. And I hope, it inspires other people to think about people with disabilities as well as visually. It's a very interesting piece. So hopefully it could be part of your collection. And I do hope that you guys in the process of your auction will bid high, bid often, and also I might bid you a goodbye. So if you have questions, feel free to shout them out and be happy to answer them as they come along. So.
Thanks, Dr. Glass.
Right. Dr. Glass.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. That's amazing. Thank you for donating such a special piece. when you see this piece in person, it is truly spectacular, and it's really powerful, and really just incredibly impactful. There's a question here, Ed, and I don't know that we've got the answer to that, but what are the dimensions approximately of each hand?
Well, they're about 4 to 5 inches tall, roughly about that wide, and maybe 3 to 4 inches deep. So it can kind of be rearranged in a couple other configurations if you like. I did have an exhibition of it in Pella, Iowa, at the Central College, and they actually had positioned all the hands like in the song of the ABCs. So there was A, B, C, D on one shelf, and there's E, F, G, and so forth. And it was a really interesting and fun way to present this piece as well.
Oh, that's great. Just so everybody knows too, the overall dimensions of the piece are 26 inches tall by 41.5 inches wide by 10.25 inches deep.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Ed.
Gotcha.
Dr. Glass.
Thank you, Ed. One thing he didn't mention, he's also a very well-known home brewer and helped us out last year when we did our partnership with the Chicago Museum and beer and glass coordination. It was really incredible. So thank you, Ed. Among his many talents, he's also a home brewer. Cappy Thompson, another one of our Levinsky Brichtova Award winners, 2005. Cappy is usually known for her work with like sort of mythic and poetic, and that's again showing up here with the blue Sphinx. You can see the body of the lion, the head of the person, and the wings. Usually she's known for doing very colorful work, very brightly colored and crazy animation, but this is a completely clear looking piece, but it's distinctively Cappy's imagery. As I said, you can see the Sphinx here, and around the back, which is, again, go to the website and see the other multiple dimensions and the video. You can see 3 beehives, and then the bees sort of coming around the side, carved into this glass, coming around to the front, and the flowers. As I mentioned, she received the Levinsky Brichtova in 2005. She has huge publicly commissioned pieces of artwork in the Seattle-Tacoma Airport, the Tacoma Museum of Glass, which many people have popped into and seen, and Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts, and the Evergreen State College down in Olympia. So Cappy is around town everywhere, works in many media. I've seen her work in ceramics as well as glass, and she teaches and lectures around the world. She's a big fan of Cappy's, and knows she's a big fan of Pilchuck as well. This is Blue Sphinx, 2015, so a slightly older piece. And maybe dimensions, I think 7.25 by 8.5 by 4.5.
Okay, lots of great work to take in all at once, but we're nearing the completion of this great presentation. This is a piece by Ann Wallstrom called Stone 15. From 2019, blown glass with a color underlay and Marini decorative application. Ann Wallstrom is both a pioneer and active contemporary practitioner in the Swedish glass and design fields. She's a good friend of mine. We were in a previous world when there was a glass conference in Sweden planned. We were putting together a interesting presentation on the history of Scandinavian glass artists, or rather Nordic glass artists, and their influence here at Pilchuck, which has been very prominent. We looked at Bertiel's work earlier, quite a few early influences, sort of a less told story, but equally important to all the Italian influence that we've had over the years. And Ann Wallstrom was one of the first Scandinavian, not the first, but one of the very first Scandinavian glass artist to travel to Pilchuck, and has returned many times. She was a designer for almost 20 years for the famed glass house Costa Boda, and then made a very successful transition into into her current existence now, based in Stockholm, where she combines artistic work in glass and freelance design for Swedish design firms. Her strong aesthetic ties together her wide use of graphic lines and sweeping arcs applied to the flat surface of textiles or the fluid forms of glass. And in her travels to the Northwest, she's made many personal and professional relationships and has made several bodies of work in Seattle and Tacoma area glass studios since 2003. This piece was actually, this piece that we see here was actually created during an artist residency at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, which was a joint program with Pilchuck. So, so really long relationship with the school, and just a beautiful example of her work here.
I'll also just point out, sorry about the typo in Anne's last name. That's actually W-A-H-L-S-T-R-O-M. So our mistake there. And the dimensions of this are 12 by 9 by 10 inches. And I think also just as Ben was mentioning, the connections to Sweden and Scandinavia, Cappy Thompson also spent quite a bit of time working at the Costa Boda factory as well, and lived in Sweden for many years.
Okay, this is a piece by Zach Weinberg titled The Final Gesture from 2018, glass tubing, neon, and transformers. Please note that this piece was made in 2018, and in fairness to Zach, had it been made this year, he may well have picked a different final gesture. But leaving that aside, this huge neon piece will fill any space with kind of glowing positivity. Zach Weinberg's yet another young talent to keep an eye on for sure. He was educated in the glass departments of Alfred in Ohio State, and is one of those practitioners who has sort of an innate technical mastery of a lot of different techniques, but combines it with a almost snarky but certainly lively sense of humor, and brings these to bear on his chosen subject matter. His projects, generally speaking, address the systems by which we interpret and allocate status to objects, and he seeks to shake up that hierarchy. He's had numerous international exhibitions and residencies, and is off to a promising career. He was one of the many exciting new voices featured in this year's Lost Sessions, but we look forward to having him back on campus soon. And this piece is quite large. I see it here as 55 inches by 43 inches by about 3 inches deep.
Our final piece for the evening, Dick Weiss from 2018. I think I saw this piece in an exhibition with Traver Gallery. Dick is represented there. He's a native of the region of Everett, born in Everett, Washington, and he received his Bachelor's of Arts from Yale University. He's, many people know him. If you've come or gone out of Seattle, you've seen these towering two-story installations at the Seattle-Tacoma airport. But if you wanted to live with this piece in your home, I actually happen to be in a home of a collector who's got a Dick Weiss piece here. So this is from a similar series. You can see Dick Weiss's work, how it would look in your home. But Dick has collaborated with many of the people in our auction and is well known around the Seattle art scene. He's completed commissions for Bellevue Art Museum. Has worked in Shanghai, China, University of Washington. He's it's a really beautiful piece to add to your collection. I don't have the dimensions. No, I do. Wait a minute. It's stained glass piece, so it's only about a 1/4 inch thick, but it's 28 inches by 12 inches. And you can kind of see the rich, beautiful color and the light that I think that cast from this is just stunning. That show at Traver 2 years ago was just amazing. I will turn it over to our MC if there aren't further questions as we come up on hour 2. It looks like we get it done.
So we just wanted to thank you all for attending this first virtual preview for our first virtual auction. And just in closing, wanted to remind you of some important dates. The next virtual preview, which will be the final preview virtually, will be a week from today on Tuesday, October 13th at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Same situation on Zoom. Additional guest appearances, so look forward to those. The silent bidding on our auction website begins Monday, October 12th at 10 a.m. Pacific. So you're seeing everything on the auction website now, but you can literally start bidding on the silent 10 a.m. on Monday. And then on Wednesday, October 14th, you can begin bidding on the live and the spotlight sections at 10 a.m. Pacific. And then most importantly, tune in for the live streamed auction. And again, as I mentioned, on the two devices, the YouTube live streamed on one device, and then you can bid and donate on your second device. That's Saturday, October 17th at 5 p.m. Pacific. We will start a pre-show on the YouTube channel at 4:15 Pacific, and that's just some helpful hints.
I didn't get the dimensions of Joey and Flora's pair.
Just if you want to make sure that you log on doing that, just making sure that you're in the right place, your connection is good, that you've got everything ready to go. So those are just some helpful dates and reminders. And we just want to thank all of you for taking this time and hearing from our artists, hearing a little bit more about each of the pieces, and for joining us, and of course, for supporting Pilchuck.
Yay. And to Faye's question, 19.5 by 12 by 12. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.